Hey Jake, today I'm going to be answering your question, capital punishment, for or against it. Capital punishment is the government-sanctioned ability to issue death as a punishment for crimes. Now, if you're like me, you might have assumed that every country probably has some form of capital punishment. And if you assumed like me, you actually are going to be wrong in this case. Currently, there are only 36 countries in the world that allow capital punishment for civilian crimes. Now compare that to 6 countries that allow it for war crimes, 50 countries that allow it, but they haven't had an execution of any kind in any reasonable historic past, and 130 that have banned it altogether. 130. Now, that list of 36, it's a pretty interesting list, but I'm just going to read you the top 8 or so ranked in order of most executions per year. Let's see here. It is China, followed by Iran, followed by Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Somalia, Egypt, and number 8 is the United States. Now, at this point, if you're like me, you're thinking that one of these things is not like the others. I immediately noticed when reading this list that there's not a single Western country on it, period, except for the United States. Now, just to be clear, even though we're on the same list as China, China has thousands and thousands of executions every single year, where in 2015 the United States only had 28. But I think it's still important to note that we still are on this short list of countries, and we're the only Western country that allows execution as a punishment for crime. I think it's also important to point out that the US has the highest incarceration rate out of any country in the world. They have millions currently incarcerated, and we have the highest incarceration rate per capita. Now, that's a topic that is huge, and I think we should address it in a later issue in this current season. But I do think it's important to note that, because you would assume that if capital punishment is allowed, and if our incarceration rate is through the roof, which it is, that we would naturally have more capital punishment cases than other countries like the 50 that haven't banned capital punishment, but they simply choose not to practice it. They have no cases in recent history that have resulted in capital punishment. So it does make sense in that regard that because of our higher incarceration rate, there are more cases of capital punishment. But now, with all that being said, I think it's important to ask the question of why do we still have capital punishment in general? I mean, if the rates are so low, why is it even a thing? And honestly, I think it's an interesting topic and a very big topic on its own of why we have it just in general, and there's a lot of history to it. But the important thing I think to note about why we have it is how we use it. In the United States, there are specific rules regarding what kinds of crimes are allowed to be punished with capital punishment. Those are all murder-related crimes, but they have to be aggravated. So murder that includes robbery or burglary, murder that includes rape, murder of an on-duty officer, things like that. Things that are just not average, ordinary manslaughter, but they actually are very specific cases, which makes you realize why the number is so low to begin with. I think it's also important to notice that of the number of cases, we are actually trending down really hard. There was a peak in the 90s where there were hundreds of capital death cases every single year, and we've been trending down ever since. We're down to 28 last year, and I'm hopeful that that rate continues to trend downwards, because I think we're starting to realize that it's not as clear-cut as we once thought it was, where, oh, we have such advanced technology, we can prove for certain that this person was the person that committed the crime. And I think we know that that's just simply not the case. You cited in your report that over 150 people on death row have been exonerated with further evidence. And it also, the same article cites that there could be a lot more than that. It's just after a person's been executed, there's really no point in pursuing the case any further. And so lawyers tend to spend their time pursuing cases where people can still be helped. Either way, I think we as a society are starting to come to the realization that we can't be 100% certain. And if we can't be 100% certain, we shouldn't be issuing punishments that can't be reversed. Life in prison, obviously, you can't give those years back to people that you've taken away, but you can at least release them. You can give them some sort of compensation to get them back on their feet. But with capital punishment, it leaves no room for error, and it really just doesn't fit with our capability to honestly prove completely, without a shadow of a doubt, that the person is guilty of being killed. And that's a pretty big commitment that I don't think that we're in a position to make, and I think people are realizing we're not in a position to make. So, to answer your question, I'm against capital punishment. Not so much that I feel like we need to start picketing and canvassing our neighbors and pushing for big reforms, because I think we're already trending in the right direction. I'm very certain that at the bare minimum, we're eventually going to end up on that list of 50 that has capital punishment allowed, but we just choose not to exercise it. I think that we as a people understand why it's a problem. I think judges and juries understand that it is a problem, especially in cases where you really can't be 100% certain. And it honestly makes more sense to have extended prison terms, even life in prison, over something like capital punishment. That being said, I don't think I'd be opposed to legislation that banned it entirely. I just don't feel like it's necessary to really push hard on this topic, considering we're already trending in the right direction. Anyway, that's me. That's my opinion on the matter. Hopefully that answers your question, shed some light on the topic. Until next time, stay curious.